What is good, my Groofs? It is Monday, September 13th, 2021, and welcome to your GG Replay. The GG Replay is, of course, your Monday, Wednesday, Friday podcast where we break down the latest in gaming news, hosted by us, the Goodnight Groofs, a place for games and a place for goofs. We're still workshopping the slogan, okay? But you know what? I am Paul, and I'm joined, as always, by Matt on this beautiful, fine Monday. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing great. Doing great. I know it's Monday, so not the greatest day of the week, but I am doing pretty good for a Monday. It's not bad, I gotta say. How about you, Paul?
Yeah. I'm doing pretty well. Well, you know, you're, if I can say, like kind of between like switching jobs right now.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of like more free time, I feel like today, maybe, right? I don't know if that's
Yeah.
so you're kind of like feeling it out, doing a little bit of a loaf between things. Maybe I'm not you know, it's kind of nice to have that freedom for a few weeks.
Yeah, a little bit of freedom here and there.
Yeah, of
Still helping out with the old place when needed. But
course.
yeah, a little bit more freedom right now. So we're recording earlier today. I was playing some Ghost
Woo.
of Tsushima earlier today. So
Oh,
yeah,
we love that.
pretty good for a Monday.
Pretty great for a Monday. You know, I'm feeling the same thing as I'm having a pretty chill Monday. You know, nothing too crazy. A little bit of an anxious morning, a lot to do, but I think yeah, I'm just gonna relax, kick back after this, and have a lovely rest of my day. And I hope everyone out there right now is kicking back and having a lovely rest of their day. As long as you're not driving, you should be you shouldn't be kicking back. You should be focusing on the road. All right. Now, if without further ado, let's get into this podcast because there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. First and foremost, I just want to remind you, as I always do at the top of the show, that if you come across any necessary corrections in today's episode, please send them to ggreplayshow@gmail.com or head down to the YouTube comments below so we can address them in the next episode. We're not perfect. We make mistakes, and we do want to make sure we right them when the time comes. Now, Matt, the reviews are in, and these are some reviews. I tell you, these are some big reviews for some big games. Well, at least one of them. And we're gonna start off right now with Encased. Encased is an isometric CRPG, very classic looking game. Got a 73 on OpenCritic. It is out now. It looks cool. It reminds me, it's a post-apocalyptic story CRPG game. It reminds me a little bit of like a Fallout-y kind of thing, sort of like one of the original
Yeah.
Fallouts. Like you said, like a bit janky. You know what? It's hard. I tried to watch some reviews on it, and most of them were for some pretty dull individuals. I'm not going to name anyone, but I couldn't find anyone who could like really sell me on the game too much. I feel like you have to kind of be in this kind of game genre. So you know what? I'll play a CRPG here and then and there, but you know, this didn't really seem like it hooked me. But 73, that's an admirable score. You know, certainly I think people looking for, you know, if there aren't enough right now, I think there's quite a few decent CRPGs coming out. But if you're looking for more, here is one that will probably suit that fancy.
Yeah, like you said in the notes, I put that it looks like a classic, janky, slow CRPG. It's clearly taking a lot of inspiration from those old Fallout games.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is totally not my thing, but I could really see this, bringing a lot of nostalgia to a lot of people. I think that this was a Kickstarter game too,
Mm-hmm.
so clearly there is a fan base that wants these kind of games that helped fund this project. So this is for those specific people. This is definitely not for me. I don't think it's for you either.
Yeah.
We have a buddy who this might be something he'd
Oh
be
yeah,
interested in. And obviously there's a lot of people who are going to be interested in this sort of thing, but definitely a more old school classic kind of game.
for sure, for sure. Moving right along, we have Tome. Tome. It's a puzzle adventure game. I got a 78 on OpenCritic. It is going to be out Saturday. Weird day for a game to come out, I would say. It looks pretty cool. It's kind of got this. The whole point of the game is like you have to take photos around an island and different locales with colorful little, well, not not quite colorful
Not
little
colorful,
characters.
actually.
The game is in black and white, but yeah, some colorful characters in terms of their personality and lots of little fun little things to take photos of. It kind of reminds me of like Donut County or
Yeah.
something kind of some charming little indie thing where there's goofy characters around and you have to kind of interact with them. Although I would say less so, you know, lighter on dialogue, lighter on story. It looks cool, but I think you'll agree with me, Matt. But I felt it was the black and white, just like I understand it's stylized to do that, but the graphics and the look of it, actually, the art style looked pretty cool.
Mhm.
It looked really crisp. The lines were nice. The designs were really nice on everything, and it's like about taking pictures. I thought it was kind of strange to not have the game in color. I wonder how much time and effort that would have took, to add that in. I don't know. What's your take?
Yeah, I don't totally understand the decision to make it a black and white game. This game does a really unique thing where you have an isometric point of view where you're
Hmm.
sort of you're on these platforms, these little, we'll call them islands, like in an abyss, like in a classic, like puzzly isometric game that you might see on
Hmm.
mobile. And you're walking around from a top down view. And then when you go to take photos, it goes to a first person view.
Hmm.
And like you said, like when it goes to first person, you see stuff in 3D. It looks pretty good. I don't
Hmm.
really understand why it's in black and white unless it has something to do with the story, maybe. But I wonder if color would have, given it some pop.
Yeah.
Almost, because it almost looks like, like you get a letter and it has a pop up, like in a
Sure.
like a.
I
It kind
got
of
that
looks
same
like
thing
that.
too. Yeah, I get that same thing too. There is I feel like a little bit of like forced perspective or layering or something to
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
create like a 2.5D effect sometimes. It's really sharp. It looks really nice. I think I just for me, that lack of color really kind of drains it, especially when it's about taking beautiful pictures of a charming little area where you can just sit and take photos. I'd feel a little more immersed, I think, if it's now maybe I'm missing the point, but I think that seems to be a common complaint that I've seen a little bit. That why not? Why no color?
Regardless,
Um,
still looks like a really charming game.
yep,
I wrote this down that it looks like an artsy isometric Pokemon Snap, which is sort of,
definitely.
with interesting, awkward, quirky characters.
Yeah,
So it looks cute, like a unique indie game where they're trying something different.
exactly. I like it. I think 78 seems like a good score, and I'm sure anyone out looking to have a casual indie experience on a little island, taking some nice pictures, this will be a good experience for them. Now, moving right along, talking about the game that we've all been waiting for. We've been talking about forever, and we've been sick of seeing every time we see it at an event. We're like, oh, really? More Deathloop? Although actually, Matt and I usually every time we see something from Deathloop, we actually get more excited for Deathloop. Well, Deathloop is out tomorrow, and it has started getting reviews coming in. It's got an 88 currently on OpenCritic, and that is brought down by some rogue reviews. But I will say some major reviewing outlets have given this a perfect score. It is definitely the kind of game that's getting a lot of perfect scores, and it's hard not to see why. It's such a novel, interesting, awesome game. I mean, Matt, this is something that you're going to be playing a lot sooner than I am, so lay it out. Like, are you excited for Deathloop?
Yeah, as soon as I saw the reviews this morning, I went and I bought it. It was, if you have PS Plus, it was like 10% off, so it was like $53 or something like that.
Okay.
So, yeah, you get a little bit of a discount because you're pre-ordering. So I figure the reviews look good. I figure I'm gonna play it anyway. I'll go get the pre-order, have it preloaded, so I can just load it up tomorrow, play it right away. I'm excited. I'm excited
Yeah.
to get the trophies. I'm excited to just play this game. Like you said, this is a game we've been looking forward to for a really long time at this point.
Yeah, it is.
And I love Dishonored. I love Hitman. These kind of games are, I just love these kind of games. So I'm really pumped for this. I love the aesthetic. I love the humor. I'm ready to play this. I'm so ready. And I'm
And
so
it's
glad
gonna be
it's done well.
sorry, go ahead.
I'm so glad it's
Yeah.
done well so far. Like you said, IGN perfect score, GameSpot perfect score. I know those two outlets get their fair share of
Yeah.
hate, which is it's fine, it's whatever, but they still gave it a perfect score, so that still means something.
Yeah, and Matt, actually, you went out of your way to like look up the like a list of all the games who got perfect scores from both outlets, from IGN and GameSpot, right? And that was like very few. It was like less than 10 games, I feel like, are in and around, right? It's not very often that they both companies end up giving a game a perfect score. So
Yeah, someone on Reddit pointed that out. They
oh, okay,
they gave this list of all the games that scored a perfect score on both IGN and GameSpot. And
hmm
yeah, it was only a few. There was
a lot of
a
Nintendo, right? A
GTA
lot of like
game, yeah,
Breath of the
maybe Breath
Wild,
of the
even.
Wild, Mario
Yeah,
Odyssey, I think was one.
yeah.
So yeah, just a handful of games, and now Deathloop has joined that crowd.
Pretty cool. Great to see it. I'm really excited to eventually play that. And I was going to say, Matt, it's good to see Deathloop too, for you, it'll be fun to play it, especially because this might be one of the last Bethesda games you're really going to get to play on console, unless you eventually, somewhere down the line get a Series X or something. There's not going to be many more for Sony, Ghostwire Tokyo, and that's it.
Yep.
So, cool to see. What I'm hoping is obviously Deathloop is it kind of seems like a one and done game, it doesn't seem like that's really rife for sequels, but I wonder if it takes off or becomes like a mega hit, do you think I wonder if they'll make more, but on Xbox or on Microsoft? I wonder if that's something that they'll do.
It's a good question. Deathloop really feels like a one-off sort of
It
game.
Does. Yeah.
But then again, you might have been able to say the same thing about Dishonored at the time.
Yep.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Are we going to see another Prey? That also seems like one that might be more sequel worthy. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting to think about. But yeah, looks like a lot of fun. I'm psyched to eventually one day play it when I get a PS5. It is definitely high up on the list. All right, let's talk about stuff that's happening or are gonna happen most of the time in gaming news. Mostly just talking about things that one day might happen. First story of the day, coming off our endless hype for Insomniac right now, coming off of that Sony event. I think Matt and I can both say that was, if you can watch a video on YouTube of us freaking out, mainly Matt absolutely losing his mind over the Wolverine game announcement. I rewatched it just before we did this podcast because I forgot. And you're like you're like shivering in excitement.
I know. I was just watching it before we were recording, actually. Yeah. I was watching it again. Yeah, I go nuts in that.
You do. I love it. The excitement is amazing. So the creative director of Marvel's Wolverine, Brian Horton. Is it Brian Horton or Bryant Horton?
It's Brian. Yeah, it's a typo.
Okay. No worries.
Quick shout out to Google Docs for not recognizing spelling errors. What is up with that?
It's like Bryant is a name with an I? I don't think so. Brian Horton said on Twitter that the game will be full-sized, which initially I didn't really understand what that was referring to when I read that tweet myself. But I see now that you wrote it's like opposed to those Miles Morales like standalone or something like Uncharted with Last Light. Is that the
Lost Legacy?
Lost Legacy. Sorry, I'm thinking of First Light from Infamous.
Or Last Light for Metro.
Or Last Light, but I think that's a real game.
That's a full game.
Yeah. And it will have a mature tone. So that's kind of something. That's really, I think, the takeaway. I never really thought this was going to be a standalone DLC kind of game. It just seems strange. It wouldn't really work in the world they've created for Spider-Man. They would have to create an entire world for it. So it seems ridiculous to create an entire space, an entire gameplay loop, and then just have it for like a standalone small game. Also, I think the main story here is the mature tone.
Agreed.
I think, what does that mean? Does that mean obscenities? Does it mean nudity? Does it mean violence? Does it mean just a dark storyline? We could get a lot of swearing and violence that doesn't really dig deep on the storyline or be adult in the way it presents itself. Matt, what are you hoping for, and what do you think maybe they were intending potentially talking about mature tone?
No, I agree with the full size thing. That was never a concern for me. I never thought that. I never was worried that it would be a full-size game. But as far as the mature tone thing, that's good to see, because I guess that's something that you worry about, like how much say is Disney going to have over what happens with this. Would Disney even really care? Disney has like Deadpool now, and they're fine with that, right? So
we've yet to see the R-rated Deadpool from Disney, but Disney says they will allow it, so that's good.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit worried on that front, but regardless of how it turns out, I don't think there's any reason to not have confidence in Insomniac. And part of the deal is people think Insomniac, they think Ratchet and Clank, they think Spider-Man. They have done brutal games in the past with Resistance, so it's not out of the realm of possibility for Insomniac. I do hope that this game has a serious tone. I hope it's brutal. I hope, it's weird to say, but I hope it's a violent game, because that's Wolverine. And I just want it to be true to the character, true to how it's supposed to be portrayed. And I really don't have any doubt that it will be. So I think we're fine. I think Insomniac's going to do this just fine.
I was going to say, you just rewatched Logan last night, right?
I did.
which one of I still stand by. I think I have to really think about it, but I think that's honestly to me the greatest superhero movie. But I will say that is a very, very dark, sad, like a very desperate tone. And yet there's moments of levity, but they're not like laugh out loud. There's a couple funny scenes, but mostly it's family and coming together and these little moments right in life, and then it becomes this brutal, violent, horrible. Logan has a horrible life forever. The
Yeah.
entire thing
Yeah.
is terrible.
Yeah.
Like demonstrably one of the worst. And so yeah, I hope we don't get like too funny, quippy Wolverine or anything like that. I think it would be cool to really lean into that, like you said, and make it about that character. I'm sure there are ways to do Wolverine like that, but I don't know. It's interesting though. I was gonna say I feel like the more light Wolverine does appear more in like established universes, like in the comics and things. There's more of a light Wolverine sometimes I think than there is on like movies and things like that, where there isn't like this established world where the world's fucking crazy anyway. It's like not as often I feel like. But in this like Insomniac Spider-Man world, which this is going to be in that universe, it sounds like from what they've been talking about, like they said something about we're happy to be able to make Spider-Man in that. They said something along that line that basically implies that yeah, it's in the same universe. It makes you wonder, like, because the world's moving a little more crazy, because we have Spider-Man and his rogues gallery, potentially we have a bunch of other heroes. Well, you can go to the Sanctum Sanctorum, so Doctor Strange is there and the Avengers Tower, and so there's clearly are Marvel heroes in that. So I'm wondering, yeah, are we going to get is he going to be maybe a little lighter because the world's so much crazier and cartoony and like superhero-y? I don't know, but
Yeah,
be
I
interesting.
think that depends if they are going to be connecting it to Spider-Man. If they are, then yeah, it might be a little bit lighter. But if you look at when you watch the trailer, I think it seems to indicate that this is going to be a serious, darker tone.
Agreed.
So I don't think there's nothing silly about the trailer. So
Nope.
I'm just not really worried about that. I really think that this is going to be handled properly. My biggest question is, and this could also dictate the tone, is what sort of Logan are we getting here?
Yep.
You can see from the back, you see his hair's a little bit more washed out. It's almost a little grayer. Are we getting an older Logan? Not necessarily like an old man Logan, like the Logan we see
Right.
in the movie Logan, but are we getting somewhere, like post X-Men life, sort
Right.
of on his own solo, a little bit older Logan? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think we really don't know, but I mean, when there's like this thought of maybe it's in the same universe, okay, like we're gonna assume probably, but like at that point, is it going to be at the same timeline? Is that where we're really going for it? Is that something they really care about? Could this be, I think it's clear we're getting like a post adamantium, post Weapon X Wolverine because he has the claws, the metal
Right.
claws. But in that scenario, are we getting him post Weapon X trying to go and like hunt down all the facilities? Mike mentioned that potentially on Game Groofs. He mentioned that. Or are we getting, yeah, like you said, post X-Men, or are we getting him during X-Men on a like on like a separate adventure where he's kind of like left the group for a while? When are we getting this? Because that's something we really didn't hear about in Marvel Spider-Man. Again, it doesn't have to necessarily be connected to Spider-Man, but I'm assuming for the sake of this that it is. We didn't really hear about X-Men at all. We heard about a lot of other heroes that could potentially exist, like MCU heroes. But I
Right.
assume due to rights and things like that at the time, because they didn't have any Fox rights or whatever, they didn't really mention X-Men too much. But at this point, are we going to see what kind of stage of X-Men are we going to see Wolverine as, and how much are we going to tie in? Or will we see tie-ins with other X-Men? Will X-Men jump in, be involved? Will we see? There's like a reference to Dazzler and Miles Morales, I believe, at some point. So we're going to see like someone like that, like like a B tier X-Man, join and be part of this game in some way or as a side character. Super interesting. I think we could go on forever, but there's so many ways this game could go, and I think we really got very little from that bar, besides that he looks fucking fed up with people's
Yeah.
shit, which I think is like typical, but I think the older he gets, the more that works.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
we got very little from it, but people are really reading into things, and I
Yeah.
don't know if that's going to really tell us much. I think they might just be throwing stuff into the trailer. Like, there are references to Canada. The people are saying there are references
Yep.
to Madripoor. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of all over the place. So I don't know really if we can totally read into it, or maybe we are just going to be all over the place in the game. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, I think if they were really something that was going to, I think they were very intentional. It's a very small, very short, very intentional trailer. It's shown from one direction. It's very on rails. So I mean every trailer is, but you know what I mean. You didn't see a lot around, and from the bits that you really can, I think everything's obviously intentional. I don't think they accidentally like left something in that's going to tell you what the game is, and if they didn't want you to know. So
Right.
because we're seeing Canada, because we're seeing Mad Report, because we're seeing other things, I think it really is open to being any section of Wolverine's life. I guess one of my main hopes is just that they maybe because Spider-Man's been done so many times, it's interesting they kind of took maybe their own storyline a little bit on the game, like something that wasn't as popular. But with Wolverine, like, hey, let's like adapt a popular story, a popular comic story. Let's get a little weird with it, you know? So we'll see. I'm psyched either way. Obviously, I know you are. But let's take the Insomniac conversation a little bit further, and we'll talk about the game they announced after, which was Spider-Man 2. So, lead VFX artist at Insomniac, Brianna Lindsay, has said on Twitter that Spider-Man 2 trailer that we saw at the PlayStation Showcase was actually real-time in-game VFX running on a PlayStation 5, not pre-rendered cinematic. You know what? I mean, it's not horrendously something I would, it looks possible that that's real. It certainly didn't look out of the realm, but it looked good. I mean, I will say this game to me is one of the prettiest games out there, especially for like, especially in terms of like character design. I mean, if you spend any time on like the Spider-Man PS4 subreddit, you'll just see some incredible photo mode shots people get,
Yeah.
especially on PS5, where you can see like they put like fibers in the suits, and every suit has their own special little things that you can find that look like real. You can see so many where people use the Amazing Spider-Man suit or the Tobey Maguire suit, either one from the Andrew Garfield, the Maguire suit, and it looks like a still from one of the movies. It looks better than a still from
It
one of the
is
movies.
crazy. It is insane.
And that's gameplay in a photo mode. So I mean, it doesn't really shock me to see that they did what looked like a very good looking trailer in pre-rendered in the or real time in the game. But it's great. Good. That's good. I want more of that. What really interests me actually is that Venom was presumably at that point a real time in game thing that they showed, and that Venom to me was more interesting because I mean they look like Pete and Miles in the trailer, but Venom looked very like rendered more like in a very scary looking way, and I'm glad to see that exact kind of thing we saw was probably the design they're going with.
Yeah. Again, there's just no reason right now to not trust Insomniac, not to take them at their word. I mean, we've said it before, but right now they can do no wrong. Now, hopefully this doesn't become a CD Projekt Red situation down the line.
Never.
I'm not too worried about that. Now, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart launched with a little buggier than normal for a PlayStation first party game, but again, that might have been a situation where they're like, we need to get this game out here because there's literally nothing else at the moment.
Yep.
So that could have been a little bit rushed. I could possibly see that. I totally think they're going to be, 2023, right? So they've got plenty of time. You would like to imagine for Spider-Man.
And they like to take a little bit of time too, because we hear a lot that Insomniac famously like does not have a lot of crunch, has very balanced work life balance. So it seems to me that they're taking a reasonable amount of time. It wouldn't be unbelievable to imagine they've got a decent little chunk of the game already worked at, especially when they already have New York finished. I'm presuming they're going to use the same bones of the city that they had before, but like obviously updated.
Yeah, I don't know. You assume so. I wonder if they're going to add other boroughs that weren't in the first game.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to get off the island of Manhattan, like you could in like Ultimate Spider-Man and stuff. If anyone remembers playing that, pretty cool to be able to do that. But at the same time, too, I mean, just more details, great. I mean, obviously, like we said before, talking about it last week, ultimately, New York in Spider-Man is cool, but it has to be so big because it has to feel big for Spider-Man because he can move so quickly and traverse so much that when you actually go down to the street corner, I started replaying Spider-Man yesterday, and when you go to the street corner, it's impressive that everyone does look different. All the spaces do look pretty different, but they're not very interactable. And I'm not saying they all have to be. It's the fucking island of Manhattan. Like, you can't interact with every street corner. That would be ridiculous. But you remember the old Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, those games, there was a lot more things where you could see random quests on the street and find random people and interact a little bit more. So here's hoping that instead of, worrying about making a new map when they have a perfectly beautiful, serviceable map, more about, adding more to it to really flesh it out and make it feel real would be fantastic. That's something I'm really looking forward to.
I agree with that. And when you were talking, I was thinking, well, maybe something they could do to flesh it out is interiors, but at the same time, like I don't know if I want them to work on interiors in my Spider-Man game.
Waste time, yeah.
I maybe like you were saying, just more interactable things outside in the world. I don't need to be able to go into a store as Spider-Man. I'm
you know what, they did
around.
they did a good thing where they had they only did this a few times and it was a real shame, where you could go into like this kind of flat effect, and you could go into a store and it was like kind of 2D in the store. Do you remember that? In some of there was like missions where people were burgling a store and then it would go like flat out from the wall and you could go into the store and everyone would kind of start fighting each other in the store, and it kind of changed, it fixed your camera, and that was really cool. And I'd like to see, like, speaking of interiors, more stuff like that, where you're like maybe fighting in an interesting camera angle or doing something that requires, like, kind of changes up the main gameplay loop, because it feels really weird and interesting to kind of get into a different movie scene like that, which was really cool.
I was just thinking, like, because I vaguely remember that, but not too
Yeah.
much. And I'm like, why don't I really remember that? And then I was like, it's been 3 years since I've played that game. Holy shit, 3 years.
You have to. It's fall. You got to get back to it. It's a good time. The leaves are changing in the game. I'm playing it right now. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, I want to get into it. I want to play the remastered version.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Yeah, didn't you say it just went on sale, right? And then
it was on sale. Off. I missed the sale. I want to get the
but
Miles
then you
Morales.
You get the weird Peter.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm used to a weird Peter.
All right. Moving on, talking about Nintendo, the Nintendo Switch. The base model Nintendo Switch actually has had a permanent price reduction across Europe. Just Europe, but they have, which I read today, was pretty interesting. It went down, it was normally £280, went down to £260, and from €330 to €270. Cool. That seems like a solid drop. That's like, what, like 15, well, in euros, it seems like 15% or something.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's a lot. That's pretty great, especially seeing as a permanent price drop. I think that makes sense. But also is pretty great, like, considering that the OLED model is already more money. It's pretty interesting to get some focus there.
Yeah, audio listeners, I just went totally out of focus because I was about to sneeze off camera.
Well, Matt works on his focus issues. I'm going to try to focus myself on the story. So kind of interesting to see that ultimately the other one, the new one, the OLED Switch, is already more expensive. So there's no real reason to lower the price of the current Switch, besides just being good guys and creating more of a rift maybe between those two segments, which is kind of cool considering how capable the baseline Switch is. And obviously, I'm not top to go like, whoa, the Switch is such a capable machine. But I mean, in comparison to the OLED Switch, the only real things you're getting as a benefit are like OLED. Otherwise, and like the size benefit, it's slightly bigger. But ultimately, you're getting pretty much the same hardware for even cheaper than it was before, compared to something that already costs more. So this is awesome. I really hope we get this here. The one thing that's crazy to me is that this didn't happen in Japan, didn't happen in North America. It's only happening in Europe, which I think is very strange.
Yeah, the only thing that I can really imagine is that this has some sort of like currency exchange thing to it, that it only happened in Europe. So I don't know if that's true, or if this is coming to North America, or if this is coming to Japan. As far as the price drops, it would make sense to me because we've talked about it many times. Like you were just saying, the OLED really isn't doing a whole lot more, and it's pricier. So, I had mentioned many times when we were discussing this that the OLED model should just replace the base model.
Yeah.
It seems like that's, if these price drops do happen globally, maybe that's sort of what they'll be going for then. But is the Switch Lite going to drop? Because now then the difference isn't going to be that much between the Lite and the right. I think they have a mess on their hands.
That's what I was gonna say. Either they're and then if they phase out the baseline Switch, let's imagine just in a weird world where that's what happens. I feel like the difference between Switch Lite and Switch OLED will be too large, and they're going to be missing a lot of people in that sweet spot who really wanted that like $300 mark. So I'm not sure. what exactly the answer is here, but I'll tell you, I mean, I'm here for cheaper Switches, but also I totally get it if, this might be a currency thing. Maybe it's just to do with, it's interesting that it wasn't just the euro though, it's also the pound. So it makes you wonder, like, what is the purpose of this? So we'll have to follow this story and see what's going on. I mean, I wouldn't mind the other Switches getting cheaper to make up for the OLED being a little more expensive. I think to really kind of draw out, if you haven't got a Switch yet, the OLED's probably the one to go for. But if you're really feeling cheap, we still have a bunch of these base models if you want one. Sure, I'll take one. I don't need the OLED. Something to consider. Also, I don't need the OLED is something I never thought I would say. I'm pretty screen obsessed, but man, I just for the price doesn't wow me.
When the OLED is out, I'm curious to know what the production numbers are going to be between the base model and the OLED. Like, are they going to significantly reduce production on the base model, or and really go all in on the OLED, or is it going to be just a fraction less with the base model? I don't know.
I really wonder going into the holiday season how many parents would really bother buying the OLED when the base Switch is there, looks just as good. And I feel like a lot of store clerks are going to be like, yeah, this is good enough for your kid.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine someone, working at Best Buy and someone goes, "Oh, I'm getting this for my kid for Christmas. This one seems more expensive. Is it worth it?" I'd probably say no. Like, it's a kid. This is small. They're small. It's fine. Like, do you need an extra like 0.8 inches? No. The answer is no. You don't need it. So yeah, I think it seems like an enthusiast Switch, or just one someone accidentally buys because they're like, I don't care, I'll pay whatever. But I'm not sure if this is really going to be the seller that they think it's going to be. But we'll have to see. Maybe that Switch price change will make a difference and undercut a little bit more. Maybe for only $50 more, people will just buy the OLED Switch. We'll have to see closer to it. All right, moving back to talking about Sony, because we are not done with Sony yet, because there's just so much stuff to talk about with them today. Jeff Grubb, our favorite industry leaker, not necessarily, but he's one of them, is reporting that Sony has plans to revive Twisted Metal, which we've been talking about, revival of Twisted Metal, possibly in the works, but with a new game to coincide with the launch of the TV series. Now, with this last time we had a Twisted Metal rumor, we talked about the TV series, and that's something they were working on, and then also there's these rumors about the game. I don't really even think we really thought about this, that they were maybe trying to like make those come out at the same exact time or around the same time. But that's an interesting thought, and that totally makes sense, because I feel like coming out with that TV show with no modern game at all seems kind of strange. I think a lot of people, even me, who did play Twisted Metal, might go, like, what was this? I think I remember Twisted Metal, seeing a TV show randomly show up. So yeah, according to Jeff Grubb, the game is in early development. We don't have any confirmation on that, but Grubb's pretty sure. Kind of interesting. So Matt, what's your take on this? I know we talked about Twisted Metal before. I don't know if you have any kind of new insights on what you think the plan is here.
Well, I don't know. Grubb says that this is part of Sony's larger plan to synergize first-party games with their movie and TV projects, which, if that's the case, that's smart to me. I wonder also if The Last of Us remake going along with the HBO show is part of that same plan. You got to think
or maybe we're going to get factions.
Yeah, or factions. The rumors say that we are getting a Last of Us remake, which is weird, but
because we got a remaster.
We got a remaster, and the game is not that old.
A full remake seems absolutely wild to me.
Yeah, so it's strange, but if it's gonna sell, so if that's what they're going for, I think that a Twisted Metal TV show is really weird in the first place. I think that a new Twisted Metal game is kind of weird because the game is such a relic of the gameplay of its time. I have a really hard time. I think I said this last time too. I have a really hard time imagining it doing super well.
Yeah, agreed.
It's just, I mean, kart racers in general that aren't Mario Kart, I guess the new Crash Kart did all right, but those don't even do that well. So I don't like these Demolition Derby type games. I have a really hard time seeing it doing well.
Yeah, I don't know. My thing is like, I feel like they're doing this, or they think they're saying the vibe is that they're doing this for fans, for nostalgic purposes, or for people who've been clamoring for this. Who's clamoring for this? Who's a huge Twisted Metal fan, and even now is like, we should get more Twisted Metal games. Like, I just feel like even if you're a huge Twisted Metal fan, you've just moved on. Like, gaming has moved on so much from Twisted Metal, and its heyday, I mean, that was like 20 years ago. Who is asking for this? GGReplayShow@gmail.com. Email us if you're out there and you're waiting for Twisted Metal. I want to know why, that you couldn't just go play a different kart racer or a different kind of game. I guess, there's like these like really edgy car games. I guess we don't really have anymore, like Crazy Taxi and Twisted Metal. And I'm just thinking like these like that are like funny and like really like violent kind of thing. Like I can't really think of games that do that now, I guess. So I mean there's something to it, but does anyone want those games now? I don't know. Like I don't know if that's something that people are even really asking for. But I mean I will say I guess there's a hole for that unless I'm forgetting some games. Rocket League isn't that, but like has that maybe a good idea for how like you could move around and do a demolition-y derby kind of movement.
Well,
Not sure.
Sony just had Destruction All Stars, which I think is something along those lines, and that didn't do well at all. I'm pretty
Sure.
sure that went to PS Plus very quickly because it just wasn't selling, and they wanted people
Right.
to play it. So
Yeah.
just have a hard time seeing success for this sort of game today, unless
Yeah.
it's totally different. If it's sort of a reimagining in some regard. I don't know. We know Sony wants multiplayer games,
Yep.
so maybe that'll help. But I don't know. I don't know, Paul. Just
I certainly don't know what a TV show would entail at all. Definitely can't remember the main
yeah,
storyline from Twisted Metal, I'll
it
tell you.
certainly wasn't regarded for the
It
story.
wasn't the thing that people bought the game for sure. And not the reason they kept playing either. But, you never know. So we'll keep an eye on this story as always, but neither of us are feeling incredibly hopeful about the new Twisted Metal. Moving on, talking about former Sony love child here, Hideo Kojima just told a Japanese magazine, NN, that he wants to make games that can change in real time. What does that mean? Great question. I'd ask Hideo Kojima, but he'd probably give me some bullshit answer. I don't know. What, Matt, before we go on, talk about a little bit more, what the hell do you think that means? Games that change in real time. Because I don't even know I feel like games already kind of change in real time, especially when you look at like procedural games. That's a good example, I feel like, of something that at least creates in real time.
I think sort of along the lines of what he did with Death Stranding, where bridges are built by other players that other players can then use, roads, ladders, that sort of thing. But on a bigger scale, I guess, maybe building like cities and terraforming environments. I don't know if that's what he's going for, but
Changing how like factions work in the game based on like maybe quests or something. I don't
yeah.
know, it's hard to see.
He's always wanting to do new, interesting, unique things though, which is great. It
Which
pushes
we
games
love.
forward. But the first thing I thought when I read this headline was that maybe this is like him alluding to what he could possibly do with cloud gaming through Xbox, which, Jeff Grubb, our favorite leaky boy, was also the one who reported a
He
possible
was.
relationship between Microsoft and Hideo Kojima on a future cloud-based game. So that's sort of what I'm feeling with this. The idea of a game that can change in real time, I mean, that's cloud-based gaming. Like
Yeah.
that's immediately what comes
Yeah.
to mind.
Totally makes sense. I mean, they're rendering the game separately on often could be much stronger computers or much stronger systems that maybe have more to do. And they're just streaming that to you. So in that, maybe they could be, streaming you a game that changes as it streams to you. It's entirely possible. I don't know exactly how cloud or streaming would really specifically, make it so that you could change games real time more so than something you could load onto onto your system. Because I feel like ultimately in a lot of these streaming things, especially with Xbox, we're dealing with stuff like Series X consoles streaming it and stuff like that. So I'm wondering exactly what they could do that allow something different than what you could just have on your console itself. But I agree with you, Matt, that when I hear cloud, I also think of that. And when I hear can change in real time, I think of like the cloud and being able to upload things and generate things procedurally and streaming it. So cool. I mean, we already heard some stuff from Garb about this before. I'd love to see more. I'm into this. I'm not really one to play Death Stranding, although maybe at some point I might finally get into it. Maybe when I get my PS5, I'll try the director's cut in the future. But I will say I like that Kojima's pushing. It seems like at this point, really going forefront of gaming. Less so, I think, even like to the point where gameplay is being pushed to the side a little bit, or the game being like a fun game to the side a bit to be more technologically and like narratively impressive. And so I'm here for it. Keep doing it. I may not play all these games, but I love it. And it reminds me kind of like the PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds thing we talked about last week, Prologue, with like this idea of he mentioned that expanding the world and the world changing and growing and becoming massive because of like runtime something.
So to give a quick example of what I mean with cloud gaming with Xbox. So a big selling point for Crackdown 3, I know that game ended up being what it was, which was not what was necessarily promised, but a big thing was that the multiplayer for Crackdown 3 was supposed to be played through cloud gaming. And that was supposed to allow for massive buildings to have this destruction to them in real time in the multiplayer. And so that's sort of what I'm thinking the cloud would allow is destructible environments or building environments and that sort of thing. I'm sure that there are things that these game developers, they're smarter than us, that they can figure out that would be more interesting than just destructible environments. But I do know that for whatever reason, and I don't know because I'm not necessarily a technological guy, I don't know why the cloud is required to have these big destructible buildings in multiplayer, but apparently it was, and that was supposed to be a big thing with Crackdown 3.
Very interesting. Yeah. So I mean, I look forward to that. I think the cloud, it does, from a layman over here, I feel like it does sound like that would allow for that kind of technology in some way or another. So bring it on. As famous, famously MMO stands over here, you and I, we're definitely looking for that big persistent world that changes. And even if it's not necessarily going to be an MMO, I just appreciate a world that can change as the game progresses in a way that is not necessarily pre-rendered or pre-fabricated in some way, right? In a way that's more natural to the game. And we see that, like I said, procedural generation, stuff like No Man's Sky does change as you play the game, and it procedurally generates interesting spaces. Obviously, there's huge limits to that, which we saw with that game. But it's cool to see games that really are different for everyone or open and strange. So
Totally.
yeah, Hideo, go for it. We're right behind you, bubby. We love it. Moving on, last story of the day. But wait, Matt, before we hit the last story of the day, I just want to remind everyone, if you were listening to this podcast on audio form in a podcast app, or if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, a 5-star review, whatever you can do. Pull that car to the side of the road or get out of the shower right now, dry your hands off, and make sure you press that button to give us some accolades, because you know what? It really, really helps us out. And I don't want to like tell you how to do your time, but it takes like 5 seconds. So, all right, Matt, final story of the day. Don't want to go too long on this because it's pretty early leak stuff here, but we did get some leaks for Redfall, which is, of course, the Arcane Bethesda game for Microsoft for Xbox that we heard a little bit about at E3 this year, and we saw a little bit of info and screenshots. So it looks like from what we get here, there's 6 characters that you can play, which we saw a bit of in the early the cinematic trailer we got in the summer. It'll be open world, which I think that's something we weren't 100% sure about, and we're still not. Obviously, these are leaks, but interesting to get that vibe that this is going to be open world, because that's something I wasn't actually expecting to see quite there. And the gameplay may take a cue from Borderlands with co-op, XP, weapon tiers, so kind of that looter shooter RPG mechanic kind of thing. Cool. I mean, that really feels right to me from what we saw from the cinematic teaser. Again, the open world, I'm a little like, oh, okay, I'm not sure. I was thinking it might be in the Borderlands style, more level based like that a little bit, where you have these worlds, these stages or environments, I guess you want to say. But yeah, I mean, that's still kind of open world though, and I really like. I mean, I'm here to play co-op with my buddies and have XP and be able to like level up my weapons and have some RPG mechanics and kind of like grind that out. Listen, I'm not going to sit and play Destiny, but I might get really into Redfall if it's like that. Matt, I know we don't want to talk about it forever, but does this make you more, less excited for Redfall? Does this kind of like get you hyped in any way?
I don't know. Hearing the comparison to Borderlands doesn't help for me. When it comes to these kind of games, I prefer them to be more MMO light, online, persistent, than just like a game that you can play solo and you can have your friends jump in. And there's like a weird line that differentiates those two that's very thin, but it is there. And something about the stuff on the Redfall Borderlands side doesn't interest me as much as the stuff on the other side.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, this game is still early in development. If you look at the screenshots, I mean, some of it is really not even textured. So
Yeah.
there's a long way to go with this game. Some of this info might even be old. Who knows?
Yep.
The game might be different now. There's no way to know. So I'm interested, and I will follow this game, obviously, but I don't know if it's really up my alley or not yet. Time will tell.
It's like magic, tech, vampires or something, Matt. Come on. It's up everyone's alley. It's got a little bit of everything. I don't know. I'm pretty excited. Like I said, I agree with you. There's that fine line between a single player game that lets people co-op in, like a No Man's Sky or something almost. When we played that,
Right.
it's like it's kind of like your game, but then other people can join you.
Right.
Versus like games that are built around co-op and dropping in and out in a really seamless way, where it's kind of where your character is persistent, but the game world isn't, or something to that kind of degree. I like that. I like when your character and their you know what I'm trying to say, their inventory, their leveling and stuff is all kind of consistent across the different games. We'll have to see. It's crazy early, but I'm interested in this game. I was from the cinematic trailer before. It's not something that is crazy hyped me like anything we saw at the recent Sony event or anything, but you know, I'm always looking forward to seeing what I'm truly looking really forward to seeing what Bethesda's going to do with Microsoft. You know, I mean, obviously we're just starting to scratch the surface of that because a lot of these games are stuff that was already in development at the acquisition and everything, of course. But Redfall, I think, is one of the first ones we're really going to see that was pretty early when they were acquired. And, you know, obviously we're going to see Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 and that kind of stuff. But it's interesting to see what else is going to happen. You know, what else can they do now that they have a bit more backing and, you know, the kind of possibly more free reign than they may have had under ZeniMax.
I will say, like, the idea of these characters with different powers sounds very arcane, but the rest, like the Borderlands type gameplay, doesn't sound like an arcane game. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if they can pull it off.
Yep, we'll find out in 2027 or whenever the fuck this game comes out. Whenever Bethesda decides to release anything ever. So we'll have to see. But exciting stuff for those of you on Xbox who can't play Deathloop. Don't worry, because Redfall will one day come out. And in the meantime, if you want to read a story about a mouse who saves the day, there's also Redwall. All right.
Deathloop is going to be on Xbox before Redfall comes out, I'm sure.
Yeah, because that's a timed exclusive, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing it's probably a year.
That makes sense. I saw people talking about that with Ghostwire Tokyo as well, wondering that's going to port over. But I think eventually all this stuff's going to probably show up on Game Pass. But it's just a matter of how long. I think probably things like Ghostwire won't take very long, depending on if it hits or not. But I'm having doubts that's going to be a major game in terms of sales. But we'll have to see. Have to see. All right. Well, everyone, that is going to be it for GG Replay. I know it went by so fast, 3 hours, and it just went by like the snap of a finger, I tell you. If you enjoy GG Replay, you out there listening to this, not just you, Matt, I'm not talking to you. Then you might enjoy all the other content on our website. We have a whole ass website, goodnightgroofs.com. We have videos, we have blogs, we have podcasts like this one, and also our Game Groofs, are all encompassing gaming podcast. We have links to all of our socials with TikTok and Instagram, everything for you to check out. And also, if you're feeling really generous, or maybe you're just a big fan of Game Groofs or other podcasts, we do have a Patreon. We have a $1, $3, and $5 tier. The $3 tier gets you early access to Game Groofs. Normally comes out on Sunday, but you can get it on Friday. $5 gets you a shout out and some other perks we're working on. And as well, $1, gets you direct access to us. We'll read your stuff and you can suggest ideas for us before we read any of our emails. And we just really appreciate it. $1 is kind of like a nice little tip. Hey, we appreciate you. And here's $1. Dollar bills, y'all. $1 bill, please. I think that's mostly it for the day.
Game Groofs, if you are interested in hearing more about the PlayStation event, we went through it, the whole thing game by game. That episode is now out forever.
Yes, good call. I forgot that came out on Sunday. So definitely go and check that out. It was a long one, about 2 hours, but that's because we really dive in and talk about every game. And but keep a good pace. It's a lot of fun. We have Mike and Josh there with us, and we have a hoot and a holler and total blast. Matt, do you have anything else to add before we head out of here for the day?
I'm off to go present my Jack and Daxter miniseries spec script to Sony.
And with that, that is it for your GG replay for Monday, September 13th, 2021. Good night, Groofs.